The morning the trouble started, the sunlight was so bright across my property that the frost on the fence line looked like it was glowing. I had woken up early, coffee steaming in my hands, wearing my usual black and red flannel shirt as I stepped onto the back deck to take in the view. My land sat on the edge of our neighborhood, still under the homeowner association's rules, unfortunately, but bordering open fields and tall winter grass. The air was cold enough that each breath looked like smoke drifting upward. Nothing in that peaceful morning hinted that the homeowner association president had decided today was the day he would cross a line no HOA should ever cross. I had no idea what was coming. I thought it would be a normal quiet morning, maybe repairing one of the older fence boards or clearing the leaves around the shed. What I didn't expect was men I had never seen before stepping onto my property like they owned it. It happened right as I reached the end of the deck stairs. I heard a heavy metallic clank like a toolbox dropping, then another, then a whispering voice. At first I thought a couple of kids had wandered through the back lot again, but then I heard something else, the deep grunt of a grown man trying to lift something big. I walked down the snow-dusted path toward the fence and saw them, three adult men standing at the edge of my property, dressed in mismatched work clothes, holding sledgehammers, crowbars, and a chainsaw. They froze when they saw me. All three were big, bulky guys, maybe in their 30s or 40s, wearing beanies and scuffed boots, the kind of men you hire for quick cash when you don't want paperwork involved. The tallest one, broad shoulders, heavy beard, looked directly at me and then at the fence. He nudged the man beside him. "He's home," the second guy swore under his breath. "The president said he was." I stepped forward. "I'm home every morning." The three thugs exchanged glances, confused, annoyed, and already nervous. The third one, the shortest but most aggressive-looking, stepped forward with a crowbar still in his hand. "We're here to do work. That fence is coming down today." I stared at him. "Says who?" "The homeowner association," he replied, lifting his chin. "They said this fence violates property boundaries and we're supposed to remove it." A cold irritation tightened in my chest. "That fence has been here for 12 years, I said, "and it's legally on my land." The bearded one stepped closer. "Look, man, we're just doing what we're paid to do. You can take it up with the HOA. Funny thing was, I already knew who had sent them. The president of the Homeowner Association, Mark Rudd, a 50-year-old man built like a sweating pink refrigerator, had been after my fence for months. He wore his trademark bright pink dress shirt that strained over his belly and black dress pants that somehow looked like they were always one size too small. He acted like he ran the entire neighborhood, because technically as HOA president he thought he did. And the biggest frustration of his life was that my fence wasn't inside his control. 2 months earlier he'd warned me that changes were coming. Last month he tried to find me over the texture of my wood panels. Then he tried saying my fence was psychologically disruptive. Whatever he meant by that, Mark had clearly decided that since I wouldn't bend, he would break something instead, literally, but sending unlicensed thugs, that was new. I positioned myself between them and the fence. "No one touches that fence," I said, "not unless you have a court order." The short one grinned without humor. "We don't need court, we got permission." "Permission from a man who doesn't own this land," I replied. "That's not how property law works." He stepped forward again, grip tightening on the crowbar. "Look, buddy, we get paid either way. We can do this fast and clean or slow and messy." Before I could respond, another sound cut through the cold morning air, the sharp crunch of rapid footsteps stomping through the snow, loud, heavy, fast. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Mark Rudd came barreling into view like a pink tornado, huge belly bouncing, dress shirt already soaked with sweat despite the freezing temperature. His bald head gleamed in the sunlight and his face was bright red with rage before he even reached us. He was panting, wheezing, sweating, yelling his three natural states of being. "Did you start yet?" he screamed at the thugs. "Why is the fence still here? Take it down." His voice hit the air like someone firing a flare gun. The thugs nodded. "We're working on it. Work faster," he bellowed. "I told you he wouldn't be home." I turned fully toward him. "I live here, Mark. When exactly was I supposed to not be home?" His face twisted into a sneer. You can't be here right now. It's my property," I said. "Not anymore," he shouted. "The HOA has reassigned this fence area as a community border. It's not yours." The bearded thug glanced at me. "Community border?" I laughed once. "He made that up yesterday." Mark stomped forward until his sweating face was inches from mine. "I have authority here," he screamed. "And this fence is illegal." "It's not," I replied calmly. He trembled with rage. "I want it gone." The short thug lifted the crowbar. "See, orders." I raised a hand. "Put it down." He didn't put it down. He smirked. "Or what?" I stepped closer, voice low, steady, unshaken. "Or you'll find out exactly why you don't walk onto a man's land with a weapon." Mark screamed, "Tear it down, now," and the short thug swung the crowbar back. Right as I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and hit record, everything was about to change. The moment I hit record on my phone, the atmosphere on my property shifted like a cracked sheet of ice. The red rec icon blinked in the corner of the screen, capturing everything in crystal clear daylight. The thugs with their tools, the fence panels still intact behind them, and Mark Rudd, the sweating, furious, pink-shirted homeowner association president, standing on MY land, yelling like a malfunctioning alarm siren. His face grew even redder when he noticed the phone. "What is that?" he screamed, pointing at it as if I were holding a grenade instead of a camera. "Turn that off." Turn IT off now, I kept it steady. This is documentation, I said, of your men trespassing, damaging property, and threatening me. The bearded thug swore under his breath. Man, you didn't say he'd record us. Mark spun toward them. Keep working, ignore HIM, but none of them moved. The short thug, the one gripping the crowbar, shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking between me and Mark. You sure this is legal? He muttered. Yes, Mark barked. Yes, it's legal. I am the Homeowner Association president. I say what's legal. I zoomed in slightly. Mark, the law doesn't work because you shout it louder. He stomped toward me, each heavy step punching into the snow with wet crunches. Sweat dripped down his forehead, instantly melting every snowflake that landed on his skin. You're interfering with an HOA operation, he bellowed. This fence violates code. I raised an eyebrow. What code? His jaw twitched. The new one. You wrote last night at 11 p.m. and emailed only to yourself. He froze for half a second, just long enough for the thugs to exchange glances. The bearded one whispered, this guy wrote the rule last night. The short one muttered, that's not legal. My cousin tried that with a landlord once. Mark spun back toward them. Stop talking, get to work. The fence comes down now. I stepped between them and the fence. No one touches anything until the sheriff arrives. The thugs stiffened. Sheriff? Bearded one asked. Yes, I replied, lifting the phone slightly. I already dialed. They're on their way. Mark's eyes bulged. His voice exploded into the air. You called the police on the HOA? I called the police on a trespass and attempted property destruction, I said. Calling the HOA would be pointless. My calmness only fueled his fury. His stomach heaved with each breath, his pink shirt plastered to his chest from sweat, sleeves dampened from wiping his face. He turned to the thugs. Do not let HIM stop you. You're being paid good money for this. The short thug lowered his crowbar. Paid enough to get arrested? You won't be arrested, Mark roared. He will, I almost laughed. For standing in my own yard, for obstructing community improvement, he screamed back. At that moment, a shadow moved near my back deck, someone stepping out with slow, heavy footsteps. The thugs turned first. Mark followed, his expression shifting from rage to panic. Because standing there, arms crossed, flannel jacket on, boots planted firm in the snow, was my older brother Matthew. He was a mountain of a man, 6'4", thick-shouldered, beard trimmed, eyes steady. He worked construction most of his life, spent 10 years doing security contracting overseas, and was not a man anyone wanted to challenge before breakfast. He looked at the thugs, then at Mark, then at me. You good? I'm fine, I said. They were about to tear down the fence. He stepped forward, boots thudding in the snow. No, they were. The short thug backed up immediately. We didn't know someone was home. Matt's voice stayed calm. Low. Doesn't matter, you're on private property. Mark sputtered. This is HOA property now? It's not, Matt said flatly, and I'm guessing you don't have the paperwork that would make it yours. Mark waved a crumpled sheet in the air. I do have it. The wind caught it instantly, ripping it from his hand and sending it spiraling into a snowdrift. Mark let out a sound like someone stepping on a horn. The thugs stared. Matt didn't even blink. That looked official, he said. Mark pointed at him furiously. You have no authority here, none. Matt stepped closer, towering over him. No authority, he leaned slightly forward. Neither do you. Mark stumbled back, slipping on his own melted sweat, nearly falling into the snow. His voice trembled now, not from fear of me, but of the 3 men he hired losing confidence. I am the president, he screamed desperately. I give the orders, you follow them. The bearded thug shook his head. Not when the cops are coming. The short one added. He didn't say anything about cops. There are no cops, Mark shrieked. He is lying. As if on cue, a distant siren echoed across the neighborhood. The sound bounced off the quiet winter air like a warning bell. The thugs stiffened. Mark went pale, sweat pouring even faster down his temples. No, this can't be happening, he yelled. He can't do this. I lowered the phone slightly. Documenting trespassing is legal. Matt nodded. Defending property is legal. The short thug set his crowbar down in the snow. Yeah, we're done here. You're not done, Mark screeched. Pick that up, pick it up right now. The bearded thug folded his arms. Nope, you said homeowner wasn't here, no police, no problems. You lied about all 3, Mark flailed his arms. I did not lie, I simplified the situation. That's lying, Matt said. The siren grew louder. Mark spun toward me. You think you're so smart recording me, calling the police? You think you can outsmart the HOA? No, I said. Just you. His jaw clenched. His cheeks shook. A vein pulsed in his forehead. This isn't over, he screamed. This is just the beginning. Matt cracked his knuckles. Good. The thugs dropped their tools and started walking away. Mark chased them, yelling, slipping, sweating, waving his arms in panic, and the sheriff's car turned onto my road. Part 2 was over. The real fight was about to begin. The sheriff's patrol SUV rolled slowly down the snowy street, tires crunching over the frozen ground as sunlight reflected sharply off its windshield. The thugs froze mid-step. Mark froze mid-scream. Even the wind seemed to pause, leaving only the sound of boots shifting nervously in the snow. I kept my phone recording as the SUV pulled up beside my driveway, lights flashing in calm, rhythmic pulses that painted the snow in red and blue. The engine shut off. The door opened. Out stepped Sheriff Dalton, a tall, stern-looking man in his late 50s, salt and pepper beard, uniform sharp and crisp despite the cold. He carried the quiet authority of someone who had seen every kind of neighborhood mess imaginable. And this one was about to become his favorite. Dalton approached, boots leaving deep impressions in the snow. His breath fogged the air in controlled bursts. He looked at me, at the thugs, at the tools, and finally at Mark Rudd, who was sweating so hard his pink shirt clung to him like wet paper. "Morning," Dalton said calmly. "Someone want to explain what's going on here?" Mark immediately tried to push past the thugs to get to him. "Officer, sheriff, whatever you are, thank God you're here. This man," he pointed at me while nearly slipping, "is obstructing an HOA-approved demolition." Dalton raised an eyebrow. "A demolition?" "Yes," Mark yelled. "A highly important community order. These men were hired to remove an illegal structure." Dalton looked at the thugs. "You hired them," the bearded one answered first. "He did," he said, jerking his thumb toward Mark. "Told us the homeowner wasn't here and everything was approved." Dalton turned toward Mark. "Did you present any legal documents authorizing demolition?" Mark puffed his chest, his stomach bouncing. "Of course I did. I had them." Dalton stared. "Where are they now?" Mark blinked. His eyes darted around the snowy yard. Then he remembered the paper had blown away earlier. Panic flickered in his eyes. "They were right here." He pointed at a random patch of snow. "They blew away, but that change anything," Dalton exhaled. "So you have no documentation?" Mark sputtered. "It was right. If the wind, this isn't fair." Dalton ignored him and turned to me. "You the homeowner?" "Yes." "And this is your fence?" "Legally, yes." Dalton nodded. "Your side of the property line?" "Absolutely." "You got proof?" I handed him a folder I had already prepared from the countless arguments I'd had with Mark over the months. Dalton flipped through it. Land survey copies, original neighborhood development maps, boundary measurements, satellite printouts, everything neat, everything simple, everything perfectly legal. "Looks solid," he said. Mark nearly choked. No, IT doesn't. ITS fake. ITS all fake." Dalton stared at him. "Sir, this is county-issued documentation." Mark's face twisted. "COUN county can be wrong. You accusing the county of misplacing landlines?" Dalton asked. "Absolutely." Mark shouted. "They never understood this neighborhood, but I do. I am the Homeowner Association president." "Suspended president," the bearded thug added. Mark whirled around. "You stay out of this." Dalton lifted a hand. "Let me be clear," he said, voice steady. "You trespassed, you brought unlicensed labor, you ordered them to destroy private property, and you have no paperwork authorizing any of this." Mark opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out except a wheezing noise. I have HOA authority." Dalton shook his head. "HOA doesn't override property law." Mark's face went purple. But the fence is ugly. ITS a nuisance. It's ITS too tall." Dalton turned to inspect it. "Looks fine to me." "ITS an eyesore," Mark screamed. "It disturbs the aesthetic harmony." "What harmony?" the short thug muttered. "Look at his house." Mark spun again. "Stop talking." Dalton stepped closer to Mark, staring him down. "You lied to these men to get them onto private property." "IT a lie?" Mark insisted. IT was a miscommunication. "You said the homeowner wasn't home," the bearded thug snapped. "But he was literally standing right there when we arrived." "I assumed he wouldn't be home," Mark yelled. "He have a job," I sighed. "I work from home, Mark." Dalton looked at the tools lying in the snow. "You gentlemen planning to use those?" The short thug shook his head quickly. "Nope, not anymore." The bearded one added, "We're leaving. We're not going to jail for this idiot." "I'm not an idiot," Mark screamed. "I'm a leader." The thugs walked off anyway, muttering things about never working for HOA people again. Mark ran after them, slipping and stumbling. "Come back, you can't leave, you're supposed to finish the job." Dalton watched him trip into a snowbank, roll halfway out, and then flail helplessly. "You all right there?" he asked, not really concerned. Mark struggled to his feet, his pink shirt now streaked with snow and dirt. "This isn't over," he shouted at me again. "You haven't won anything." "Seems like he has," Matt said from behind me. Dalton put his notebook away. "I'll file the report. This is clear-cut trespassing and attempted property damage." Mark's eyes bulged. "Trespassing and me? I can't trespass. I live here." Dalton shrugged. "Not on his land you don't." Mark let out a rage-filled scream so loud that birds flew off nearby trees. "You heard the last of me. I'll take this to the board. I'll take it to the county. I'll take it to anyone who will listen." "Good," Dalton said. "Start with a lawyer." Mark gasped dramatically, stomped his foot, and stormed off, sweating, seething, slipping every few steps. But even as he left, something in his posture worried me. He wasn't done. His rage wasn't finished. He was planning something, and sure enough. That night I found out exactly what he had done, and the fight escalated beyond anything I expected. Even after the sheriff left and the thugs walked away, I could feel it. Mark Rudd wasn't beaten. Men like him didn't accept defeat. They absorbed it, twisted it, and spat it back out as something worse. The sun had dipped lower across the neighborhood, turning the snow orange and pink, reflecting off rooftops like a slow-burning fire. By evening, everything was quiet again. Too quiet. My brother Matt had gone home, promising to come back in the morning. I made dinner, answered some work emails, and kept glancing out the window. Nothing moved except the shadows of branches in the winter wind. But at 9:17 p.m., my security camera sent a motion alert. And everything changed. I opened the feed expecting a raccoon or stray cat. Instead, the camera showed Mark alone, standing directly in front of my fence in the darkness, breathing heavily, fog rolling from his mouth. He wore the same tight, sweat-stained pink dress shirt, even though the temperature had dropped to freezing. His face was red, swollen, and furious, and he kept pacing back and forth like a stressed bull ready to charge. Then he started talking to himself. "He thinks HE won," he muttered, voice trembling with rage. "He thinks HE's smart, but I'm smarter. I run this place." He stepped closer to the fence, pressing his forehead to one of the wooden boards, melting a tiny patch of frost with the heat of his anger. "I'll make HIM pay," he whispered. "I'll make HIM regret ever DFONGME." I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. This wasn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This was personal. My camera zoomed slightly as he stepped back. Then he pulled something out of his pocket, a folded stack of papers. He waved them in the air like a trophy. "I have new rules now," he yelled into the quiet night. "Official rules, SIGNED rules." He hadn't signed them. He had forged something. I reached for my jacket. If this escalated, I wasn't letting him destroy anything without witnesses. By the time I got outside, Mark was already in the middle of the yard, not at the fence line, but inside my property, stomping around and jabbing his finger at imaginary points in the snow. My boots crunched loudly as I approached. "Mark," I said, "what are you doing on my land?" He spun around so fast his shirt stretched across his belly like a balloon. "I'm Ray measuring community boundaries," he yelled. "I have the authority to adjust land allotments." I stared at him. "No, you don't." He waved the papers again. "I do now." I stepped closer. "Mark, let me see those papers." "No," he screeched, stuffing them back into his pocket. "They're confidential. They're illegal." I said. He let out a strangled noise. "You can't say that." "You're not a lawyer. That's why I have one," I said calmly. His eyes widened. "You brought in legal people." "I will," I said. "First thing in the morning." Mark staggered backward as if struck. No, that's not ALLOWED." I frowned. "You think hiring thugs to break my fence is allowed?" "Yes," he screamed. "Because I ordered it and I am the HOA. You're suspended," I reminded him. His entire face convulsed. A vein throbbed near his temple. "That is temporary." "A misunderstanding, a paperwork error." "It was a unanimous vote," I said. "I can unanimously undo it," he shouted. "By yourself?" "Yes," I blinked. "That's not how unanimous works, Mark." He sucked in a furious breath. "I'm calling an emergency meeting right here, right now." He reached into his other pocket and pulled out his phone. I expected him to call the board, but he did something worse. He called the thugs, all three, on speaker. "You come back right now," he screamed into the phone. "The fence must come down tonight." The bearded thug's voice replied, confused. "Man, no, we're not coming back. You almost got us arrested." "That was his fault," Mark yelled, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "It was your fault," the thug said. "No, the short one chimed in. "Dude, we're done. Lose our number." "You can't quit," Mark shrieked, but the call disconnected. Mark stood there with his arms still raised, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it had betrayed him. Then he slowly lowered it and looked at me, face red, drenched in sweat, chest heaving. "You think you're safe," he said, voice shaking. "You think because the sheriff showed up you're protected, but this THIS fence will come down even if I have to do it myself." I exhaled. "Mark, go home before you commit another crime." He stepped forward inches from me, his hot breath clouding the cold air. "I'm not done." His foot slipped on the icy snow and he stumbled back. "Go home, Mark." "I'm not done," he roared again, louder, angrier, desperate. I took out my phone and recorded. His eyes darted to the screen and he snapped. Mark lunged toward the fence, grabbing one of the loose panels. He pulled with all his strength, grunting, sweating, screaming. The wood creaked but didn't break. He slipped again, falling to his knees. He tried again, failed again. The fence didn't budge. Winded, panting, trembling, he stood up, and in the glow of the porch light, I saw tears of frustrated rage in his eyes. "I'll get help," he said. "Real help." "You already tried that," I said. "No," he hissed. "Not them." He stormed off into the darkness, but not toward his house, toward a neighbor's, a specific one, a board member who hated me almost as much as he did, and that meant one thing: tonight wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a coordinated attack. But what Mark didn't know was that I wasn't going to face it alone, not this time. The next morning broke with a harsh, blinding winter sun, one of those mornings where the entire neighborhood glowed white, almost too bright to look at without squinting. Frost clung to the rooftops like powdered sugar, my fence stood firm and unbroken, and the air carried that crisp silence that usually comes after a snowfall. Except today, that silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the moment before a storm. I woke early, still wearing my flannel shirt, poured a cup of coffee, and stood by the window watching the road. I had barely taken 2 sips when a line of cars turned into the neighborhood. Not ordinary sedans or quiet hybrids, no. These were loud trucks, worn-out work vans, and one boxy SUV with an engine that rattled like loose gravel. And stepping out of the first truck was none other than Mark Rudd, stuffed inside a fresh pink dress shirt that was even tighter than the last 2 days. His face was already red. His neck glistened with sweat in the freezing air. Behind him came a group of men, 5 of them wearing matching jackets that read Community Enforcement Assistance. The jackets looked official at first glance, but something about them felt off. They were too cheap, the patches too shiny, the handwriting on the clipboards too crooked. These weren't enforcement officers. These were more thugs. Mark marched across the snow like a general ready for battle, chest puffed, arms flailing, trying to imitate authority. "Today," he yelled, "the fence comes down no matter what." One of the fake enforcers leaned toward him. "You sure about the cops?" "Yes," Mark screamed, spewing spit into the cold air. "I spoke to a board member last night. We're taking back control." I stepped out onto my deck. "Morning, Mark," I called down. "You brought more criminals." Mark whipped around, red-faced, trembling. "These are official homeowner association enforcement specialists." The tallest man in the group muttered. "He paid us cash last night." Mark spun. "Shut you, P." I walked down the porch steps, calm as ever, recording the whole scene. Mark, I said, you already called thugs yesterday. That didn't work. You tried to tear down the fence yourself. That didn't work. What makes you think today will be different? He sneered. Because today, he said, waving his arms dramatically, I have a legal order. He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out another wrinkled sheet of paper. I approached slowly. Let me guess, I said, you wrote it yourself. His face went purple. It is signed by a board member. Which one? The only one who understands MY vision. That meant Carl, the one neighbor who hated me almost as much as Mark did. He lived 3 houses down. Sure enough, right on cue, Carl waddled into view, equally overweight, equally sweaty, and wearing an oversized faded green sweater that did nothing to hide the stains on it. He raised a hand. The fence is illegal, he said, breathless. I smirked. Morning, Carl, he glared. I didn't vote for your shed last year. I didn't need your vote. Well, I'm voting on this fence, he shouted. Your votes don't matter, Mark bellowed, because I am using executive HOA authority. I laughed. Mark, your executive authority expired the moment the board suspended you. His jaw dropped. That suspension was a lie. It was documented in writing, I said. A forged document, he screamed. The enforcers shifted uneasily. The tall one whispered, this dude's unhinged. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed from behind me, not angry stomps like Mark, confident ones, purposeful ones. Brother Matt stepped into the yard wearing his winter coat, boots, and a glare sharp enough to cut steel. Behind him came 2 more men neighbors, both ex-military whom Mark had deeply underestimated. The tallest nodded at me. He causing trouble again? Always, I said. Matt crossed his arms. Let's settle this. Mark's voice cracked into panic. This is an illegal gathering. Only HOA members can be here. Matt stepped forward. We live here. Another veteran folded his arms. And we don't like bullies. The fake enforcers immediately backed up. Maybe we should leave? No, Mark shrieked. No one leaves until the fence is down, but it was too late. A new vehicle rolled into the neighborhood, a county truck white with blue stripes and a logo on the door, the kind of truck that meant trouble for liars. A land surveyor stepped out, a tall, older man with a clipboard, measuring tools, and a bright reflective vest. He scanned the scene, then approached me. Morning. You called in for a boundary verification? I nodded. Yesterday after the sheriff left. Mark screamed, that approved. The surveyor ignored him, walked to the fence line, and began taking measurements. Everyone watched in silence as he drove stakes into the ground, took readings, checked an electronic device, then scribbled on his clipboard. Finally, he looked up. Fence is perfectly inside homeowner's property line, he said. In fact, he pointed at Mark. You've been stepping onto his property this entire time. Mark froze. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. And the surveyor continued, the HOA has no authority to reassign land boundaries without county approval, which they never requested. Carl gasped. Mark told me. Mark lied, the surveyor said plainly, and if any demolition happened today, your HOA could face major civil penalties. The fake enforcers instantly stepped away from Mark. We're done, one said. We're not going to prison for you. Get back here, Mark screamed. This isn't over, but they were already in their van driving away. Mark stood alone now, sweating in the snow, humiliated, defeated, trembling with frustration. He stomped, slipped, caught himself, and pointed at me with a shaking hand. You think you won, he screamed. This isn't finished. I stepped closer. Mark, it's finished. No ITS, because you're done. At that moment, the surveyor handed him a notice. This is an official citation for unauthorized land interference, he said calmly. Expect more fines. Carl staggered backward. We're getting fined? You, the surveyor said, pointing at Mark, are getting fined. The neighborhood watched as Mark collapsed to his knees in the snow, hands on his head, screaming into the frozen ground. My fence stood untouched behind him, strong, solid, and still mine. Matt patted me on the shoulder. Told you he'd destroy himself. He was right. And that day, the Homeowner Association learned something important. If they wanted a fight, they had picked the wrong homeowner.